So today we are talking about read and its impact on your studies. So I'm studying my second degree now, and this time in computer science. My previous one was in linguistics. And I'm gonna be honest, I used to be a really diligent student, but now, before my lectures have even begun, I feel like I've been drinking every second day with my new classmates. And don't get me wrong, it has its beauty, because you meet amazing people, you have your fun, but at the same time, losing control is a lot easier than you think. So it got me thinking, how do you manage to combine learning something demanding, like a foreign language, and still keep your social life so that it doesn't completely ruin your GPA? And so today we are talking about exactly that. If you approach language learning systematically, you will see that there are three most important pillars that you need to focus on, which are grammar, vocabulary, and the foundation for both grammar. We are going to start talking about memory because it's the key to making the other two pillars strong, and also it is mostly directly under attack from the fun part of the university life. Why is memory so important? That's very simple. When you first learn a new word, it first lands into your short-term memory, and if you want it to land into your long-term memory, you need constant repetition. That is actually the difference between your passive and active vocabulary. Passive vocabulary is when you can recognize a word when you read or hear it, but passive vocabulary is when you can actually pull out that word out of your brain and use it actively. That's why it's active. To get from passive to active, you need that word to stick in your long-term memory. What does memory have to do with partying? Well, because when you go to a party, you can do lots of different stuff. You can take lots of different stuff. And so let's say if you're a weed smoker, right? You probably might have noticed that it affects your short-term memory, because it does. And so alcohol doesn't help either. That means if you're trying to learn new difficult material, but you still drink or smoke heavily, you are sabotaging the process of learning and moving this new information from new term to the long-term storage. And you will just forget what you learned. And on its own, it's not a bad thing if your goal is just to pass the course, get your credit, and that's it. But from my experience, if you learn the first 2 semesters and you kind of get that basic information that you need to know, it will be eventually a lot easier for you in the future. So you save your time in the long run. That's why I do not advise actually cramming before the exam, but prepare in advance so that you save that information, you store it inside your brain, and then you remember things. So that next time you don't have to cram for exams every single time. You just have to pull out some information from your brain that it already knows. And so my point here is not that you shouldn't ever have fun. It's just that if you know that there is a test coming up, if there is some difficult concept that you need to understand and you still haven't figured it out, in that case, maybe it would be better to just skip smoking weed or drinking heavily for a couple of days or a few days, just so that you protect your brain's ability to learn. Okay, so now we are good protecting grammar. What the fuck does it have to do with grammar and vocabulary? Many people think that language learning is chaotic because there is a rule and then you have millions of exceptions to that rule. But let me simplify it for you. How about we picture that a language is a tree, not a mushroom. But you see, the trunk on its own is just a log. It looks so naked, so ugly, right? If you wanted to make it a real tree, you need leaves. And so leaves are your vocabulary. Now think about the proportion. If you have a tiny, weak trunk, but you try to hang thousands of leaves on it, the whole thing is unstable. And that is someone who memorizes tons of words but cannot build a single sentence. On the other hand, if you have a massive, strong trunk but only 3 leaves on it, you look kind of ridiculous. That is the person who knows every single grammar rule but still makes mistakes in its application, and the only thing they can say is probably like, the cat is on the table. And don't get me wrong, I'm not trying to judge anyone here. I'm just saying don't fall into extremes, it's never good. This analogy is here to show you that you need a balanced approach. You cannot just focus on one thing and forget about the other and then expect to be fluent. So now we've got memory, we've got grammar, vocabulary. But wait, Olga, you said we're gonna talk about having good social life and then keeping a good GPA. Yeah, exactly. That is when discipline comes in play. If you know you have to focus on both, and we know that already, grammar and vocabulary, that means you have to dedicate your time to both consistently. And I'm not saying that you have to run 5-hour marathons and then learn only 10 words a day. I'm saying that you need sustainable habits. You can do some grammar exercises for 15 minutes a day, learn some words for 15 minutes a day. Of course, it's not enough, but my key point here is that you have to divide your time equally to what you do. And keep doing that consistently. By doing all of that consistently, you keep your tree growing. Your language knowledge is your tree, and your tree needs time to grow. And you cannot grow it overnight, meaning if you cram for your exams the day before or the night before the exam, most likely you will forget like 80% of what you learned the day after. And like I said, it's not a bad thing if you just want to pass your course. But in the long run, you save a lot more time and a lot more energy if you simply learn that, if you store that in your memory. But if you prepare for exams like that, you simply dump all the information that you know, that you have in your short-term memory and forget it. Okay, so now we're gonna sum everything up. We have grammar protection, right? You have to make sure that you're mindful about what you take, especially and when you take that, because if you have exams coming up, you do want to have a clear head and clear memory. You also have to stay balanced. It brings you nothing if you cram one night before the exam or even 2 nights before the exam. It's better to start early because and work consistently. If you work for like 30 minutes a day, but every day, it will bring you a lot more than studying for 5 hours in the long run. And be disciplined. Get yourself to sit down and do something. Do not expect anyone to come and tell you what to do. It has to be your responsibility. You have to know when you've been doing that too much. You have to feel it, right? If you are feeling that you're falling behind, that is your nervous system signaling you to stop. That means you have to get back on track. You have to understand you don't have to choose between being a good student and having fun. You can do both. Just be smart about it. And now I want to hear from you. What's your biggest struggle when it comes to balancing? Let me know in the comments. Thanks for watching. I'll see you in the next one.